Has it literally been about 8 years since the last time I test drove a smaller pickup truck from Ford? Well, apparently, when I look back and realize it was 2011. Hey, welcome to this Edition Road Warrior. I'm your host, Grant Roberson. Now, thankfully, time has finally caught up with us, and, well, the reincarnated Ford Ranger is finally back. It's almost perfect timing for the Ranger to kind of make its debut. After all, the smaller pickup trucks has really had a surge as of late, and even my bigger is better mantra has kind of taken a back seat to the likings of these certain offerings that are coming out. Now, what I like is really it starts with the design and where smaller pickup trucks truly have grown, almost like they've had a hormone injection and really want to walk around like their chest is puffed out, but still they're only about 4 feet tall. And you see it here on the outside of the Ranger. Really, the exterior really mimics kind of the big bad boys, but the price point and, well, of course, footprint scale things down just a hair. So when it comes to the Ford Ranger, it comes in two offerings when it comes to the cab models, but don't be confused because they're, well, equal in overall size. Now, what you're going to find is about 211 inches overall, wheelbase around about 127. Now, what you have here is the Super Crew, and as the name hints at, it's better for the crew, basically when it comes to that second row legroom. The only compromise is in bed length, going to fall in around about 61 inches. Now, if you prefer better bed length versus, well, overall comfort on the inside, that's going to be the Super Cab. Now, the difference really is in legroom numbers. Going to go from about 34 inches there in the second row on this model to around about 30 inches in the Super Cab. But where you, well, compromise on the inside, gains there in the bed length, pushing it just under 73 inches. Now, some other numbers to think about really is overall height, just under 6 feet tall. As for width, without the mirrors, just over 6 feet wide. Now, if you look at the total numbers with the mirrors, that's around about 85 inches. So it definitely feels wide, but obviously you can tuck those in when you get into the tight spots, pretty much leaving a nice narrow body. But one last big number to think about is ground clearance. For trucks, you're definitely going to go off the beaten path. Now, it's going to come obviously in a 4x2. That's going to be around about 8.4 inches. But as for the as-tested four-wheel drive model, that's going to be about 8.9 inches, again, for either Super Crew or Super Cab models. Now, at the four corners, you're going to find standard 16 and 17-inch wheels depending on model, but you can upgrade to the 18-inch like you see here. As for the tire, it is a 265/60. Now, for the actual dressing up of the rim, I do like the kind of dual tone, the subdued approach versus the bright chrome polish we remember from the Throwback Thursdays. Now, again, this model is the Super Crew, which equates to around about 61 inches of bed length here at the back end. And really, when it comes to a truck, that's still plenty of offering comparative to about a foot more there on the Super Cab. What we found is anytime you have a truck, well, what happens? The family calls for a favor. This ended up being kind of a move of sorts, bringing some furniture back and forth, and, well, this cab handled it quite nice. Now, where it all starts is just the good old ingress, and specifically getting inside the rear bed area. Now, first off, you got a good old traditional step. That's just going to help you in a traditional sense reaching in here. But when it comes down to folding this, well, how does the ingress work out? Now, what you're going to find, just a standard operating procedure here, and that basically means it's a banging affair. I don't prefer that. We can simply go to the next level and make it a nice softening approach. I'm sure it's not that much of an upgrade to make it a standard feature, but again, this is just kind of the old school method of letting it fall into place. Now, what you're typically going to have is overall height getting into this is fairly substantial. Now, what you're going to see is around about 34 inches to step from here to there, just not typical process. As for the bumper height, that's around about 28 inches. Now, what I prefer is kind of what some of the big boys are doing and putting a niche here on the outer portion of the bumper. In some cases, even putting a fold down step wouldn't hurt to maybe put those in here, because after all, the ground clearance really makes for a decent climbing into the rear cargo. With moving the furniture in and out, one thing you worry about is really kind of the wear and tear. Thankfully, here on this model, nice in sprayed in bed liner really prevents all the scrapes and dings, and it certainly comes all the way up around the side. Nice protective rubber cladding on the upper side, so if anyone leans over, puts things, you're not going to get that scratch and dent wear here on the upper rails. Now, as for the overall length with the rear tailgate down, about 85 inches, and that pretty much handled most of our furniture. Now, if you do have bigger items like wood or whatever, it's going to extend just a hair, but that's to be expected. Now certainly raise this up and it's going to give a nice angled approach. We actually did take an 8-foot ladder, and it did seem like a lot of it was hanging out over here, so we did strap it down. Even better about that, well, there's nice anchor points. Now the traditional approach is pretty much putting these anchor points at the four corners, but what you're going to find is just this extra one right here, just in a nice place to just add one more anchor point to, well, help things out. Now when it comes to overall payload, it's going to be between 1,500 and 1,800 pounds depending on model, but one thing that is equal across the board is towing capacity, around about 7,500 when properly equipped. Now as for, well, safety here at the back end, you will have the good old backup camera and backup sensors. Really allows you to dial in specifically, even more so when you're towing. When it comes to technology, the Ranger brings some old habits along with it instead of going to the future tense and where everything else is trending. What I'm referring to is just the simple part of ingress into the vehicle. Now certainly the throwback to the good old days of a key fob and a traditional key is where this vehicle left off, so certainly it's where it picks right back up. What I prefer is more of the advanced smart key systems, and well, even more so is this keypad here, the good old code system that, well, we all remember, and well, it doesn't really need to be on this model. Now other than that, the ingress is just good old traditional unlock, lock, and it does have a remote start here as well. Now another security weakness is here at the fill up. Wouldn't hurt to just make this always locked with the vehicle. When the vehicle's unlocked, certainly it pops open, but as always, that's maybe another step, another integration that this vehicle's just not ready for. One thing it does do is when the vehicle is locked, the rear tailgate is locked as well, and well, with it being open to the elements like is, I'm not sure that's a helpful trend, because when you come back here, the only problem is you can't just, well, unlock it with the pull of a handle, but instead you have to fumble around, unlock it. Now you can easily get access, and with your hands full of gear, well, I'm just going to simply throw it in and get back in the truck. Now, it doesn't take a lot of power to get this vehicle down the road, but again, it has 7,500 pounds of towing capacity, so there's got to be some decent offering here on the hood. More specifically, it is a 2.3 liter inline 4-cylinder with EcoBoost technology. Now, it's going to deliver around about 270 horses and 310 foot-pounds of torque. Now, coupled to that is a 10-speed automatic transmission. When it comes to the grille warfare, one thing that's more pronounced than, let's say, the grille is the Ford and Ranger insignia. Now what you see is the good emblazoned Ford here, and almost in 3D elements there at the back tailgate. Now what you also see is the embossed Ranger, again sweeping across the front and really large and in charge there on the tailgate as well. Now as for the grille itself, really typical open face graded kind of appointment, black accent. Now sweeping down, what's interesting, a true contrast down below. Now typically you're going to see this kind of design sweep down, but what you actually have is kind of more of an open port look. It almost looked like kind of out of place. I thought something potentially had broken off, but really this is just kind of open and almost, well, reachable in there. If you want to kind of play around with the radiator, feel free. It's barely an arm stretch away. Now over here on the side, typical bedazzling of the headlight, a lot of jeweling going on. Nice cylinder-like approach for the main headlight, and extra brightness here on the side. Fog light tucked down low. Now we have a little bit of contrast going on with body color, some lower accents as well as this kind of brushed look, as well as some nice anchor points should you need to pull someone out or be pulled out of the mud. Now I mentioned the backseat legroom being just around about 34 inches here on the Super Crew, and what you're going to find up front, not too shabby, around about 43 inches. As for overall comfort, nice center console and pretty decent support overall. This one have kind of a fabric seat, but really nice bolstering and support where you need it. In the second row, you can say it's all about, well, connectivity in the form of 2 USB connections and a traditional household outlet. The only issue for backseat drivers may be airflow, because where I typically like to find it is here on the back of the center console in the form of 2 vents, but unfortunately, it's pretty much going to come right through the middle or through the air vents on the floor. For the infotainment system, we're going to have a huge touchscreen, really easy to use, traditional setup for Fords, as well as pretty much everything else you could pretty much use. What I like is the climate control is really right here, barely a glance down for the driver. You do have the traditional approach down below Nice symmetric knobs when it comes to volume and tune select, but really just a nice overall setup. Now this one did have the optional dual zones up front, but you can save a few bucks by just going with the standard mode. Standard gauges when it comes to analog tach and speedometer, but a nice digital radar in the middle with tons of safety, basically right down to blind spot awareness, cross traffic, excellent cruise control, lane keeping, and even pre-collision alert. Simple controls will be found on the steering wheel in the form of basically entertainment on this side, changing the LCD readout there for the gauges, as well as some other functionality here when you go to cruise. Plenty of cup holders around this vehicle too, between the front occupants as well on the doors, and you're going to have a nice elevated support for that center console. Now one thing you'll find is a decent offering when it comes to the overall storage, but it isn't illuminated, so it makes it a little bit darker at night. That does for this edition of Road Warrior and a test drive behind the wheel of the 2019 Ford Ranger, a vehicle that is finally back to the market, and well, I finally realized I missed it. These small, big trucks really deliver exactly what I'm looking for. Now again, the Super Crew really gives you that extra comfort for the crew, and a modest offering back here, but simply change your mind, go with a Super Cab, a little bit less, a little bit more. Really simple numbers, and after all, that stays the same length, so you're not really changing or compromising that versus the big trucks that easily can add inches onto their overall size. The Ranger delivers all one big number. You just kind of modify, well, how you want it configured. Now, as always, thank you for watching this edition of Road Warrior. Keep both hands on the wheel and eyes straight ahead.